Welcome to African Folktales by Tammy. Please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more interesting stories. Also share this story to someone who might be interested. Let's get into the story. In the serene but bustling city of Owoduni, Richard Okchukwu was a name whispered with both reverence and fear. Known for his charm, wealth, and a string of mysterious tragedies, he was a man of contradictions. Over the past decade, Richard had married 5 women, all of whom died under strange circumstances. The authorities had investigated each case, yet they found no concrete evidence to implicate him. To the outside world, Richard was an unlucky widower, but to those who paid closer attention, he was a man shrouded in darkness. Richard lived in a grand mansion on the outskirts of Owoduni, a place secluded from prying eyes. The house itself was a labyrinth of secrets, its walls holding stories that would chill even the most hardened souls. Despite the rumors, Richard never lacked admirers. His wealth, good looks, and silver tongue made him the envy of men and the object of desire for women. One evening, at a charity gala in the heart of the city, Richard spotted his next target, Chika Okori. She was a young, strikingly beautiful woman with sharp features and an air of quiet intelligence. Chika had recently moved to Owoduni to open her interior design business, hoping to escape her troubled past. She was ambitious, cautious, and fiercely independent, qualities that Richard found intriguing. Their meeting seemed serendipitous. Chika was admiring a painting of a serene lake when Richard approached her with his signature charm. "A work of art admiring another work of art," he said smoothly, his voice like honey. Chika smiled politely, but something in his gaze unsettled her. There was an intensity behind his charm that felt predatory. Over the next few weeks, Richard pursued Chika relentlessly. Lavish gifts, surprise visits to her shop, and grand gestures became his modus operandi. He was careful, methodical, and always played the role of the perfect gentleman. Chika, though flattered, felt a growing unease. She confided in her best friend, Tessie, who had heard whispers about Richard's tragic past. "Chika, be careful. Men like him don't have clean hands," Tessie warned. But Richard was persistent, and soon Chika found herself agreeing to a date. During their dinner at the upscale Ebony Garden restaurant, Richard revealed little about himself, instead steering the conversation to her life and dreams. He was a master manipulator, weaving a web of trust and admiration around her. Chika couldn't shake the feeling that Richard's interest in her was too intense, too calculated. But her desire to escape her own loneliness made her ignore the red flags. As they laughed over dessert, Richard thought to himself, "She's perfect. The perfect bride and the perfect prey." As the days passed, Richard deepened his hold on Chika, weaving a narrative of love and destiny. He sent her flowers with handwritten notes, booked appointments at upscale spas, and paid for renovations to her studio without her asking. On the surface, he was the perfect suitor, a dream come true. But beneath the charm was a man plotting his next move. Chika, meanwhile, was torn. Richard seemed too perfect, but she couldn't ignore the whispers she'd heard. Tessie remained her voice of caution, urging her to tread carefully. "Chika," I dug into his past. His first wife, Amaka, died after falling down the stairs. His second wife, Kimi, drowned in their pool. "Every wife has a tragic story, but none of it adds up," Tessie said, her voice trembling with worry. "People die in accidents, Tessie," Chika replied, though doubt crept into her voice. "It doesn't mean he killed them." Tessie shook her head. "Too many accidents for one man, Chika. Just be careful, don't let your guard down." That night, Chika sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through articles about Richard's past. Each story painted him as a grieving widower, a man whose life was marked by loss. But the details were vague, and she noticed a pattern. Every wife died within a year of marriage. The coincidence was too glaring to ignore. Her heart pounded as she thought of the way Richard looked at her, as though she were a puzzle he was eager to solve. Could she truly trust him, or was he hiding something darker? The next day, Richard invited her to his mansion for dinner. The invitation felt sudden, almost urgent. "I want to show you my world," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Chika hesitated but agreed, deciding to use the opportunity to learn more about him. When she arrived, the grandeur of his home left her speechless. The chandeliered dining room, The intricate carvings on the walls and the vast collection of antique books spoke of wealth and refinement. But something about the house felt cold. As they ate, Richard shared stories about his travels and business ventures, carefully avoiding any mention of his past. After dinner, Richard offered to show her around. He led her to a locked door at the end of a dimly lit hallway. "This is my private study," he said, his tone suddenly serious. "No one is allowed inside," Chica nodded, hiding her curiosity. Why would he mention the room if he didn't want her to think about it? As they walked back to the living room, her mind raced. She knew she had to find out what was behind that door. That night, as Richard walked her to her car, she forced a smile and thanked him for the evening. But as she drove away, she whispered to herself, "Something isn't right. I need to find out what he's hiding." The mystery of the locked door consumed Chica's thoughts. Why would Richard deliberately point it out if it wasn't significant? That night she replayed the evening in her mind, analyzing every word he had said. Something about his calm demeanor felt too practiced, too polished. The stories about his past wives hovered like a dark cloud, and Chica couldn't shake the growing sense of dread. She decided she needed more information. The next morning, Chica visited Tessie at her small shop in downtown Komeji. Tessie, ever the skeptic, listened intently as Chica described her evening at Richard's mansion, focusing on the locked door. "A locked room?" Tessie asked, her brow furrowing. "That's suspicious. What if he's hiding evidence?" "I don't know, Tessie. Maybe it's nothing," Chica said, though she didn't believe her own words. I need to know more." Tessie leaned closer. "Chica, listen to me. Men like Richard don't make careless mistakes. If he showed you that door, it's because he wanted to see how you'd react. Be careful, he could be testing you." The weight of Tessie's words sank in as Chica returned to her apartment. She knew Tessie was right. Richard was meticulous. If he was hiding something, getting to the truth wouldn't be easy. But Chica wasn't one to back down from a challenge. That evening, Richard called, inviting her to spend the weekend at his mansion. "I want us to spend more time together," he said, his voice warm and persuasive. Chica hesitated, but she realized this was the perfect opportunity to investigate. "I'd love that," she replied, masking her apprehension. When she arrived at the mansion on Friday evening, Richard greeted her with his usual charm. The house felt even more imposing in the fading light, its shadow stretching across the neatly manicured lawn. As they settled in, Richard seemed unusually attentive, watching her every move. Chica felt like a chess piece in a game she didn't fully understand. Later that night, as Richard retired to his room, Chica decided to act. She waited until the house was silent, then slipped out of her room and crept down the dark hallway toward the locked door. She had seen Richard place a key in the drawer of a nearby cabinet earlier, and she silently retrieved it. Her hands trembled as she inserted the key into the lock. With a soft click, the door creaked open. The air inside was heavy, and the dim light from the hallway revealed rows of shelves filled with old photographs, documents, and something that made her blood run cold, a collection of wedding rings. Chica's breath caught in her throat. Each ring was labeled with a name: Amaka, Kemi, Chidinma, and the others. Beneath the rings were neatly organized files detailing the lives of Richard's past wives. It was a grotesque shrine to his victims. Before she could process what she was seeing, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Panic gripped her as she quickly turned off the light and closed the door, slipping the key back into its place. She darted back to her room, her heart pounding as Richard's shadow passed by her door. As she lay in bed feigning sleep, her mind raced. She had uncovered the truth, but now she had to figure out how to escape with her life. She realized too late that Richard was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Chica barely slept that night, her mind a whirlwind of fear and determination. She knew she had stumbled upon something sinister, proof that Richard was not the grieving widower he pretended to be, but a cold-blooded killer. Yet exposing him would not be easy. His charm, influence, and calculated moves had kept him untouchable for years. The next morning, Richard was as affable as ever, serving her breakfast with a smile. "Did you sleep well, my love?" he asked, his tone dripping with affection. Chica forced a smile, nodding. "Yes, thank you. Your home is so peaceful." but she couldn't ignore how he watched her. His gaze lingered a little too long, his demeanor a little too measured. He was testing her, just as Tessie had warned. Chica knew she couldn't let him see her fear. She had to play her role perfectly while figuring out her next move. As the weekend unfolded, Chica pretended to relax and enjoy Richard's company. She laughed at his jokes, admired the sprawling gardens, and even let him teach her a few moves in his private gym. But every moment was a performance. Beneath her calm exterior, she was strategizing. On Sunday evening, Richard surprised her with an unexpected announcement. "I've been thinking, Chica, why wait? Let's get married next month." Her heart skipped a beat. Married, she forced a delighted expression. That's wonderful, Richard. But don't you think we should take some time to plan? A wedding like ours should be perfect. Richard's smile faltered for a split second, and Chica noticed. "I prefer things simple," he said, his voice taking on an edge. "Besides, when you know, you know." Chica felt the weight of his words. He wasn't asking, he was declaring. And in that moment, she realized she had less time than she thought. If she didn't act quickly, she might not live to see the wedding day. That night, after Richard went to bed, Chica contacted Tessie using her hidden phone. She whispered into the receiver, recounting everything she had found in the locked room. Tessie was horrified. "You need to leave, Chica. Now." "I can't," Chica replied. "He'll know something is wrong. I need to find a way to get the evidence out." Tessie hesitated, then said, "I know someone who can help, Inspector Bayo. He's a retired detective, but he's the best. I'll call him. Stay strong, Chica." The mention of help gave Chica a glimmer of hope. But as she hung up, she heard the creak of footsteps outside her door. Her stomach clenched. Was Richard listening? She held her breath as the footsteps stopped, then moved away. Chica knew she was running out of time. The house was no longer just a trap, it was a battlefield. And she would need every ounce of courage and cunning to survive. The following day, Richard suggested they take a drive to the countryside, to a secluded area he called a special retreat. Chica's instinct screamed at her that this wasn't just a casual outing, it was a calculated move. But refusing would make her seem suspicious, so she agreed with a soft smile. As they drove out of the city and into the dense forest of Umu Hills, Chica secretly texted Tessie. "He's taking me somewhere remote, call that detective." She deleted the message immediately after sending it, her heart pounding as Richard glanced at her. "You're quiet," he said, his voice laced with curiosity. "Just enjoying the view," Chica replied, forcing a calm tone. "It's beautiful out here," Richard smiled, but his eyes stayed on her for a moment too long before returning to the road. Chica clenched her fists in her lap, trying to control her growing panic. She couldn't afford to show any sign of fear. When they arrived, the retreat turned out to be a small cabin nestled in the middle of nowhere. Richard opened the door with a grand gesture. "Welcome to our little paradise," he said, his tone dripping with charm. Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. A single bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living area filled the space. It was cozy, almost too perfect. Chica forced a laugh. "I wasn't expecting something so quaint," she said, pretending to admire the rustic decor. Richard chuckled. "I thought it'd be a good place for us to spend some quality time away from distractions." Chica's mind raced. She knew she had to get a message out to Tessie or Inspector Bayo, but Richard stayed close, watching her every move. As the day went on, her nerves were stretched thin. Every smile, every laugh felt like a performance in a deadly play. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Richard's tone grew darker. "You know, Chica, trust is the foundation of any relationship. Don't you agree?" "Of course," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I hope you're not hiding anything from me," he said, his gaze piercing. "I'd hate to find out that you were lying to me." Chica's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "Why would I lie? You're the only one I trust." Richard leaned back, seemingly satisfied. But Chica knew he wasn't fooled. He was testing her, waiting for her to slip up. That night, while Richard slept, Chica slipped out of the cabin and into the woods. She needed a signal to contact Tessie or the inspector, but the area was remote. Desperation fueled her as she climbed a small hill, searching for reception. Finally, a single bar appeared on her phone. She sent a quick text to Tessie. "He's watching me. Cabin in Numo Hills. Please hurry." She deleted the message and hurried back to the cabin, praying that help would come before Richard made his next move. Chica barely managed to slip back into the cabin before Richard stirred. She climbed into bed, her heart pounding as she forced her breathing to steady. In the dark, she could feel his presence, hear the subtle shift of his body as he turned slightly toward her. She wondered if he could hear her frantic heartbeat, but she remained still, pretending to be asleep. The next morning, Richard was unusually quiet, studying her as she prepared breakfast. "You seem tired," he said, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. Chica forced a laugh. "I didn't sleep well. New places always make me restless." He nodded, but the tension in his gaze didn't fade. Chica knew he was testing her, looking for cracks in her facade. Every moment with him felt like a balancing act, and one wrong move could be fatal. By mid-morning, Richard suggested a hike through the woods surrounding the cabin. "It's peaceful out there," he said with a faint smile. "You'll love it," Chica hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to refuse. But she couldn't risk raising his suspicions. "Sure," she replied, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. The hike was eerily quiet, the dense forest swallowing the sound of their footsteps. Richard led the way, occasionally glancing back at her with a calculating expression. Chica felt like prey being lured into a trap. As they reached a clearing, Richard stopped and turned to face her. "Do you trust me, Chica?" he asked, his voice low, almost hypnotic. "Of course," she replied, her heart pounding. He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "Good, because trust is everything." Chica swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. She had to stay calm, had to keep playing her part. "I trust you, Richard," she said softly. Satisfied, he led her back to the cabin. But Chica couldn't shake the feeling that he was onto her, that he was watching her every move with a predator's precision. That evening, as Richard prepared dinner, Chica excused herself to the bathroom. Locking the door, she pulled out her phone and checked for a signal. To her relief, there was a faint connection. She quickly texted Tessie again. "He's suspicious. I'm scared. Did you get help?" This time, Tessie replied almost immediately. "Inspector Bayo is on his way. Stay strong." Chica exhaled shakily, but her relief was short-lived. As she returned to the living room, Richard stood by the window, his back to her. "Who were you texting?" he asked without turning around. Chica froze, her blood running cold. "Texting? I wasn't. Don't lie to me," he said, his voice dangerously calm. Her mind raced, searching for an explanation. "I was checking my email. I didn't want to fall behind on work." Richard turned to face her, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he smiled. "You're always working, Chica. You need to relax." She forced a laugh, but her hands trembled as she clasped them together. She knew the game was reaching its climax, and she had to hold her nerve. Unbeknownst to her, outside the cabin, Inspector Bayo and his team were closing in. The cabin's atmosphere was suffocating. Richard's piercing gaze followed Chica as though he were dissecting her thoughts. She busied herself with small tasks, her mind racing with the knowledge that Inspector Bayo and his team were on their way. The question was whether they would arrive in time. As the evening dragged on, Richard grew increasingly restless. He paced the room, his footsteps echoing ominously. "You know, Chica," he said, his voice deceptively light, "I've always believed that people reveal their true selves when they are under pressure." Chica froze for a fraction of a second, her hand gripping the edge of the table. "What do you mean?" she asked, keeping her tone casual. He stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "You've been different lately, distracted. I can't help but wonder if there's something you're not telling me." Chica's pulse quickened, but she forced a smile. "I'm just adjusting to all of this. You've been so generous, Richard, and I don't want to disappoint you." He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Disappoint me? You could never do that, Chica. But trust is fragile. It only takes one lie to break it." She nodded, keeping her face neutral, though her heart pounded in her chest. "I understand." Richard studied her for a moment longer before his lips curled into a smile. "Good, I knew you would." Later that night, as they sat by the fire, Richard handed her a glass of wine. "To us," he said, raising his glass in a toast. Chica hesitated, her stomach twisting. She knew better than to trust anything he gave her, but refusing would arouse his suspicion. She raised the glass to her lips, pretending to take a sip, then lowered it with a smile. "To us," she echoed. Richard watched her intently, his expression unrepressible. Chica's mind raced. Was he testing her? Did he know she hadn't drunk it? The sound of a distant car engine broke the tension. Richard's head snapped toward the window, his body tensing like a predator sensing danger. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice sharp. Chica's heart leapt. Could it be Inspector Bayo? She shook her head, feigning confusion. "Hear what?" Richard rose from his chair and moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. His fingers tightened on the curtain as he scanned the tree line. "Stay here," he said, his tone low and commanding. As he stepped outside, Chica's mind raced. This was her chance. She grabbed her phone and texted Tessie. "He's outside. Help must come now." Outside, Richard prowled the perimeter of the cabin, his sharp eyes searching for anything amiss. The forest was silent, but he could feel someone out there. His instincts screamed danger. Unbeknownst to him, Inspector Bayo and his team were watching from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Richard prowled around the cabin, his sharp instincts on high alert. The crunch of leaves underfoot, the faint rustle of the wind, it all felt too perfect, too staged. Years of evading suspicion had taught him to sense when something wasn't right. He crouched near a tree, scanning the dark expanse of the forest. Inside the cabin, Chica's hands trembled as she clutched her phone. She had sent the message to Tessie, but now she was trapped, unsure if help would come in time. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. She glanced toward the door, half expecting Richard to burst through at any moment. Outside, Inspector Bayo and his team were inching closer. Hidden behind dense foliage, they watched Richard carefully, noting his movements. Bayo signaled to his men, instructing them to hold their positions. "He's dangerous," Bayo whispered. "We need him alive, but we don't take chances. Wait for my signal." Richard suddenly froze, his sharp eyes locking onto a faint glimmer of light reflecting off a distant rifle barrel. His lips curled into a smirk. "So the game begins," he muttered to himself. He casually walked back toward the cabin, his posture calm but his mind racing. Whoever was out there had underestimated him. He pushed open the cabin door and found Chica sitting by the fire, her face carefully composed. "You seemed nervous earlier," Richard said, his tone deceptively soft. "Is there something you want to tell me?" Chica shook her head, forcing a smile. "I'm just tired, Richard. It's been a long day." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "Tired or hiding something?" Her breath caught, but she held her ground. "What could I possibly be hiding from you? You've been so kind to me." Richard's eyes searched hers, and for a moment the room was thick with tension. Then he smiled. "Of course, you're perfect, Chica." The words sent a chill down her spine. She knew he didn't mean them as a compliment. They were a declaration of control. Suddenly, there was a loud knock at the door. Chica's heart leapt as Richard's expression darkened. "Stay here," he said sharply, moving toward the door. As he opened it, his body stiffened. Standing on the porch was Inspector Bayo, his badge gleaming under the porch light. "Good evening, Mr. Richard Okechukwu," Bayo said, his voice calm but firm. "We need to have a word with you." Richard's eyes flickered with a mix of surprise and calculation. "Inspector, what's this about?" he asked, his voice steady. Bayo didn't flinch. "We've received troubling information, Mr. Okechukwu." "May I come in?" Chica's pulse raced as she watched the scene unfold, praying Bayo had brought enough backup. She knew Richard wouldn't go down without a fight. Richard stepped aside, his smile never faltering. "Of course, Inspector, come in. Let's clear up this misunderstanding." But behind that smile, Chica could see the storm brewing. Inspector Bayo stepped inside the cabin, his calm demeanor masking the tension in the air. Two plainclothes officers followed, positioning themselves discreetly near the door. Richard's eyes flickered toward them, his mind calculating every possible scenario. Chica sat frozen by the fire, her heart pounding in her chest. She tried to meet Bayo's gaze without giving away her relief. "Quite a lovely place you have here," Bayo said, his tone casual but laced with purpose. His eyes roamed the cabin, taking in every detail. "You must enjoy the solitude," Richard chuckled, stepping toward a chair. "I do. It gives me time to think, away from the noise of the city. He sat crossing his legs with an air of confidence. But I'm curious, Inspector. What brings you all the way out here? Bayo pulled out a notebook, flipping it open. We've been looking into some old cases, Mr. Okichukwu. Cases involving your late wives. Tragic accidents, all of them. Richard's smile tightened. Yes, very tragic. I've had a string of bad luck, as I'm sure you know. But I've been cleared of any wrongdoing. I assume you've read the reports. Bayo nodded. I have thoroughly. But you see, there's something that didn't sit right with me. Each wife passed away under unusual circumstances. And now here you are with another young, beautiful woman. He glanced at Chika, his expression unrepressible. Richard laughed, the sound hollow. Inspector, are you accusing me of something? If so, I'd appreciate it if you got to the point. Bayo's smile didn't waver. Not at all, Mr. Okichukwu. I'm simply here to ask some questions. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. Where were you last night between midnight and 1 a.m.? Richard's eyes narrowed, his mask of composure slipping for a split second. Here, of course, with Chika. Isn't that right, my love? Chika nodded quickly, her throat dry. Yes, we were here. Bayo's gaze lingered on her, as if trying to decipher the truth. He turned back to Richard. And this cabin, it's quite secluded. Mind if we take a look around? Richard's smile vanished. Do you have a warrant? Bayo's grin widened. Not yet, but you know how these things go. Cooperation always looks better, doesn't it? Richard leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold. I've done nothing wrong, Inspector. You're free to look, but I assure you, you'll find nothing. Bayo stood and motioned to his men. Let's take a look around. Chika, you're welcome to stay here if you like. Chika's stomach churned as Richard's gaze bore into her. He knew she was involved, but his silence spoke volumes. As the officers began their search, Bayo stayed behind, his hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. Tell me, Mr. Okichukwu, do you believe in karma? Richard's jaw clenched. I believe in fairness, Inspector. And right now I feel like I'm being treated unfairly. Bayo leaned closer, his voice a low whisper. Fairness has a way of catching up, Richard. And when it does, it rarely goes in your favor. Outside, one of the officers called out, Inspector, you need to see this. Richard's composure cracked, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the armrest. Chika's breath caught as Bayo turned toward the door, a satisfied gleam in his eyes. Stay right here, Bayo said firmly, walking out. As the door closed, Richard's gaze locked on Chika. His voice was icy. You think you're clever, don't you? Chika's blood turned cold at Richard's words. His tone was low, but his intent was clear. She met his gaze, forcing herself not to flinch. I don't know what you're talking about, Richard. He stood slowly, his imposing frame towering over her. You're not as good at hiding as you think, Chika. I saw your phone light up last night. You've been scheming behind my back. Her heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. You're being paranoid. I've done nothing but trust you. Richard leaned closer, his voice a menacing whisper. Trust? Is that what you call inviting the police to my home? You're just like the others, pretending to care, all the while plotting against me. Outside, Inspector Bayo returned, his expression unrepressible. Mr. Okichukwu, he called, stepping inside. We've found something interesting. Richard straightened, his calm facade returning in an instant. I'm sure you have, Inspector. But whatever it is, I'm confident it's a misunderstanding. Bayo smirked. Let's see, shall we? He held up a small black case. We found this in the crawl space beneath your cabin. Care to explain? Richard's eyes darkened, but his voice remained steady. I have no idea what that is. Bayo opened the case, revealing its contents, several vials of an unknown liquid, a syringe, and photographs of Richard's previous wives. Chika gasped, her worst fears confirmed. Interesting collection, Bayo remarked. But that's not all. We also found files in your locked room at home. Detailed records of each wife's routine, their weaknesses, and their deaths. Richard's mask of composure cracked. He glanced at Chika, his expression a mix of rage and betrayal. You did this, he hissed. Chika stood, her voice trembling but firm. I trusted you, Richard, but I knew something wasn't right. You killed them, didn't you? All of them. Richard lunged toward her, but Bayo and his men moved quickly. They subdued him, pinning him to the ground as he thrashed violently. You think you've won, Richard spat, his voice venomous. You'll never prove anything. Bayo crouched down, meeting his gaze. Oh, we will. The evidence speaks for itself. You're finished, Richard. As the officers cuffed him, Richard's defiance turned to desperation. Chica, you don't understand. They were weak. They didn't deserve. Enough, Bayo snapped, cutting him off. Save it for the courtroom. Chica watched as Richard was dragged out of the cabin, his shouts echoing in the night. Relief and exhaustion washed over her, but she couldn't shake the lingering fear. Bayo placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You were brave, Chica. Thanks to you, this monster won't hurt anyone else. Tears welled in her eyes, but she managed a nod. I just wanted to survive. And you did, Bayo said firmly. You outsmarted him, and now he'll pay for his crimes. As the cabin grew silent, Chica realized she had faced pure evil and lived to tell the tale. Richard Okechukwu's reign of terror was over, and for the first time in years, justice had prevailed. But as the officers led him away, Richard's final words echoed in her mind. This isn't over, Chica. I always have a plan. She shivered, knowing she'd have to live with the scars of his threats. Yet for now she was free, and for now that was enough. We've come to the end of this story. Please subscribe to my channel to support me. Thank you.